This is Close Encounters. Close Encounters. True stories, real people. Close Encounters on Cross Rhythms.
Yes, hello and welcome to Close Encounters with me, Anne Donaldson. My guest today is John Weston. Welcome, John, to Close Encounters. It's good to have you today.
Thank you. It's good to be part of this. Thank you.
Now then, John is a scientist, come baker, come lots of other things as well. He's a man who wears many hats, but I'm sure that's going to come clear as we chat. And so, John, tell us a little bit about your early years. I know they were spent in Southend in Essex.
Yes, that's right. Or to be more accurate, a little village called Little Wakering, just a few miles outside Southend. That's where I was born and brought up and spent my early years. A lovely little rural place that I very much enjoyed. Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah. Wonderful. So those early years, what were the influences around you as a young child growing up into a youth?
Yes, I mean, obviously family were important. I was very blessed with my parents who took good care of myself and my sister. We were in a family. My parents weren't regular churchgoers at that time, but often on a Sunday morning, perhaps to have a bit of peace and quiet, they would send my sister and I off to Sunday school. That was a bit of an influence. But I guess, like many people, one of my biggest influences were my friends, my peers. When I was about 14, my best friend of all, a guy called Steve, he went along to a Christian coffee bar that was being run in the local village, actually in Great Wakering, the next village along. This was a coffee bar being run by a team from local churches, and also I think there were a few people from London Bible College that had come along to help out. And anyway, my friend Steve went along on the very first evening and became a Christian through that evening. And so for the rest of the week, he was nagging me incessantly. John, you've got to come to this coffee bar. It's brilliant. I found, such a good thing here. You will love it. And I was pretty resistant. I was convinced that Christianity, that church was not for me. So I kept putting him off. But in the end, because he was such a good friend, I thought I'll go along on the last evening because I'm only committing myself to one visit, and there aren't any more after that. And just for his sake, I'll go. At that evening, that one evening, I heard people explain the good news about Jesus Christ, which had such a profound impact on me. So I was an early teenager at the time, perhaps going through a process of maturing, where one thing I was becoming conscious of was my mortality, that actually as human beings we don't live forever.
That's right.
I guess as in my sort of young, almost childish way, I developed quite a strong fear of death as this realization dawned on me. What I heard that evening told me that there was an offer of eternal life that was found in Jesus Christ and in him alone, that Jesus had conquered death, and that made a real impact on me. And I think more than that, I was then thinking, well, goodness, how on earth can I, get this eternal life? I was aware that, like most young teenagers. I wasn't perfect. I not just wound up my parents no end, but did all sorts of things. And what really struck me more than anything else was that what I heard told me this was a free gift that God offered to me. That there was absolutely nothing that I could ever do to earn it, deserve it, win it in any way. It was just a gift that God was willing to give to me because he loved me so much. It's almost bringing a lump to my throat now, 50 years later almost, to think of that. And so at that point, I decided that I wanted to live with and for Jesus for the rest of my life.
That's wonderful, John. And so you went home, and what did you share it with your parents straight away?
Yes, I did. And their initial reaction was that they thought I'd been captured by some sort of a sect, that I was just becoming too extreme, and that it's okay to take a nod in God's direction, but to live my whole life, well, that was for God, was really a bit on the extremist end of the spectrum. I mean, by God's grace, within a couple of years, they too discovered Christ and came to faith, and ended up being on the PCC and the treasurer of their local Anglican church, and not just sending me to Sunday school, but got really involved. So, but the initial reaction was, a bit questioning.
So transformation in that home. That's so beautiful what you've just shared, and you continue to grow up and go through more adult education. What did you do when schooling came to an end? Yes, at the end of my school, I was very privileged. I won a scholarship to Cambridge University and was able to go there to study science, which I loved. I obviously had some ability in being able to go and do that. I mean, huge privilege. Something that I enjoyed studying and loved doing. Well, we want to hear more, but I think it's a good time to listen to your first choice of music, and if you would introduce it, John, that would be wonderful.
So my first choice is the traditional hymn Amazing Grace, written, as many people perhaps know, by John Newton, a reformed slave trader who was just so amazed that God would pour his love out on him. And that was very much how I felt through what I've just described and my coming to faith. How amazing the grace of God is, that we don't earn it or deserve it, but he gives himself to us. Amazing.
Wonderful, thank you. You're listening to Close Encounters. I'm Anne Donaldson, and my guest today is John Weston. Now, John, before your song choice, we were talking about you going to Cambridge University. So how did studying at Cambridge as a scientist, how did that knit together with your relatively young faith?
Well, as I said earlier, I really enjoyed studying science. However, it was a challenge with my faith, simply because there were many voices, particularly in the media at that time, really making claims that science had disproved faith and Christianity in particular, and that to believe the truths that science was discovering meant that it was completely incompatible with a Christian faith. And I found that a challenge because, I knew I was one person and I couldn't be this professional scientist during the day. And then, a Christian in my spare time and suddenly morph into a completely different person. I was the same. I was one person, and it was difficult. I went through a period of a kind of wrestling with that until I came to the conclusion that that wasn't the case, that the two were not incompatible. And I think, for me, that wasn't about, having to, cut bits out of the Bible or just believe certain bits of Scripture. I do hold that the Bible is entirely true and it is God's revelation to us. However, what really helped me to bring the two together was the realization that the Bible is not a scientific textbook. It describes truth, but it uses other forms of communicating that truth. So whether it's stories or history or worship, even in the Psalms, these are different ways of conveying truth, but it wasn't a scientific textbook, and that I really found very helpful, and it kind of brought the two together to the extent that I believed, as many others have before me, that when you really look into creation, all that God has made, it doesn't point away from God, but quite the contrary.
Yeah.
It points towards a logical, rational creator. The world, the universe is not a chaotic place, but the laws of gravity or whatever are true for all time in all places, and those things point to the person of God, the intelligent force behind it all. I was encouraged by that, in that even while I was still studying at Cambridge, above the door of the Cavendish laboratory, there's a quote from Psalm 103 that actually points to the Creator God, that has been approved by many of the scientists who had studied there before me.
Yeah. So how did you keep your faith strong when you were there? Did you join a local church? Were there others around you? What kept your faith fresh and growing and strong?
Yes, I mean, a mixture of those things. I was a member of a local church in Cambridge, where there was the opportunity to not just rub shoulders with fellow students and university members, but other people from the city. I was also very involved in the Christian Union. So my final year, I was on the KICU, that's the Cambridge Intercollegiate Christian Union,
right,
executive as their prayer secretary. Serving others and using my faith, as well as learning from all the amazing Christian speakers who would come.
Yeah. And so you came to the end of your time at Cambridge. What did that lead to, John? What was the next step?
So, on leaving university, I got a job working in science. My first job was with British Rail. I worked for a number of years at their technical centre in Derby. Started off in their research department and then in Department of Mechanical and Electrical Engineering. A lot of it was small, mundane things, but a lot of what I did was involved in failure investigation work. So if a metal component broke, I would be involved in looking at bits down the microscope or whatever and working out why it had failed, whether it was a manufacturing fault or corrosion or misuse or what the evidence pointed to as to why the thing had failed. Usually for a safety concern, sometimes because there might be a financial claim involved that was significant. But yes, for those sorts of reasons.
We're so grateful.
I did get involved.
Yeah, we're so grateful that that people like you in that type of research, in that sort of work. And, sometimes we're just happy to get on the train and don't think about what goes on behind the scenes. And so it's just so good to know that someone like you has been involved in all that. So how did you then, when you left university and you were in the workplace, how did your faith continue? Were the girls as well? Only a mum asks questions like that.
Yes. There weren't girls plural, but in my case, one particular girl. Yes, I actually married Lorraine, who's still my wife 37 years later. I married her 6 months after leaving university. She was someone that I'd actually known through the youth fellowship back in Wakering outside Southend. Yes, we had a youth fellowship that used to meet at a farm that drew young people from many different churches, denominations. Yes, so my wife often tells others that she found me down the farm, which is it's true. I can't deny it. Yeah.
So it's time we listen to your second choice of music, and you have chosen "Jesus is Lord."
Yes, this is a song written by Stuart, Townsend and Keith Getty. So there's various songs, I think, entitled "Jesus is Lord," but that particular one. And it talks about Jesus is Lord, the cry that echoes through creation. And this for me just picks up on what I was describing about, the universe and what we can observe of it through science or any other means, actually pointing to Jesus' lordship.
Absolutely.
That he is the one behind it all.
My guest today is John Weston. And we were hearing about John's work as a scientist, but things were about to change, weren't they?
Yes, so they changed in a number of ways. I moved away from British Rail and got a similar job, or a job doing a similar thing, managing a small test laboratory and consultancy that was based in Great Yarmouth in East Anglia. And so moved to Lowestoft. And at this time, I was really enjoying what I was doing. I could have quite easily carried on doing that until I retired. But I guess God had other ideas. And I began to feel a sense that possibly God was calling me into full-time ministry within a church. And I began to feel that there were all kinds of little prompts, everything from someone who came up to me, someone who didn't know me, never met me before, at the end of a particular meeting, and said they just felt God was asking them to tell me that he was going to use my lips. There were times in church services when whatever the preacher happened to be speaking about, I just had this sense that maybe God was pushing me towards becoming a minister, and just feeling a racing in my heart. I was doing stuff in church, like leading an Alpha course with my wife, and seeing that being very fruitful. I was enjoying it, and just having a sense, I want to do more of this. And so all this was raising these thoughts about maybe becoming a minister. But I got to a point where, I didn't want to just do it and find that I'd got it wrong, that it was just my wishful thinking for whatever reason. I really wanted to know, God, is this you and your prompting, or is it just my imagination? And I can remember after one particular evening service when I'd had this sort of racing of the heart and this sense of God's calling, I came home after the service and just cried out to God in prayer and said, look, if this is you, I will do it. But I'm conscious there will be sacrifices, not just for me, but for my wife. And by that time we had 2 young sons, for them as well. If I follow this path, I just want to be sure and know this is you, God. And as I cried out to him, I felt, I don't know why, but I just felt a sense that I needed to be honest and say to God, what was holding me back? What was stopping me from handing in my notice as a metallurgist?
Yes.
And going to college again to study to become a minister. And as I wrestled with this, I came up with 3 things that would stop me. The first was, at the time we were living in a lovely house. It was a large new house with a large garden. It's very rare to get a new property with a large garden, and we loved it. And I didn't want to give it up and move and go somewhere else. So that was one thing that was a bit of a hold. Another thing was this concern, particularly for my 2 sons. They were about 2 and 4 years old at that time. And I thought the fact of moving them when we went to college, and then again 3 years later when we possibly got a church somewhere else, it would disrupt their education, their friendship groups at a significant young age. And I didn't want to do that just on my whim. And the third and fairly pragmatic reason was that I couldn't afford it. There would be fees to pay, college fees, and also my wife, because the children were so young, would spend most of the time looking after them while I was studying. Yeah. So her earning potential was fairly limited. Where on earth were we going to pay the rent and get money to buy food and all the essentials? So I laid all these things out before God, and I think I was probably expecting some writing on the wall or in the sky or something.
Yeah.
And I can remember just in that moment feeling actually quite disappointed, because there wasn't any writing on the wall, and I was no nearer to knowing whether this was of God. So at that point, almost in despair, I just turned to my Bible reading. I was, like many people do, following a set of notes with a particular passage for each day. And although we're talking over 25 years ago, I can still remember very clearly the passage that I turned to. It was Luke chapter 9, verses 57 to 62. And I started reading, and it was people that were kind of on the verge of following Jesus, and he was challenging them. And the first one who said he would follow Jesus, Jesus replied, well, foxes have holes and the birds of air have a nest, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. And it was just saying, well, Jesus, in following the Father's will, didn't have a home.
Wow.
And it was gulp. That was one of the things that I was saying held me back. The second one was someone who said, let me say goodbye to my parents before I come and follow you. And Jesus said, no, just come now. And that was talking about concern for family and doing the right thing for them. Wow. And although it was parents rather than children in my case, again, it seemed to speak so clearly to that second reason I had for perhaps putting it off.
Yeah.
And then the third one was someone who said, first let me go and bury my father. And although it wasn't something that in any way I would have wished to happen earlier, I guess one thought that had crossed my mind was, well, maybe I'll wait to go to college until I come into an inheritance or in some other way have the money to pay for this break in earning. And again, that just seemed to say, no, Jesus is saying to this man, don't wait for the right time, just come and follow now. And boy, just those three things in the passage that I was reading then and there, just I knew from that moment God was definitely calling me to take this step. So I handed in my notice, applied for theological college, and went off and trained to become a minister.
John, thank you for sharing that in such beautiful detail, because we're listening and we're learning. You know, God speaks to us so clearly through his word, and what you've just shared, we can identify with. So I really want to thank you for that. We're going to now listen to your next choice of song, which I'll introduce. It's Over All the Earth. Thank you. Now, we were hearing about you going to theological college, and at the end you would be a minister in appointments. So tell us a little bit more, John.
Okay, so yes, having trained and jumped through all the hoops to become a Baptist minister, I went, and my first church I was called to was down in Hastings on the south coast. I spent 12 years very happily ministering there. It was a good time, and it's much anything else, the time when my two sons did most of their growing up. Then God called us on to a church back in Essex, actually very close to where I was born and brought up, which was, again, a really good time. And it was a time when I could do the right thing for my family, because both my parents sadly passed away during my time when I was ministering in Essex. And it was a real blessing that I was able to be close by and take mum to hospital and be with dad when he was on his own. So God is good.
He is.
But yes, so that's a very brief summary of many years of good ministry. Particularly during that second ministry at the church in Essex, I began to make use of one of my other passions in ministry, and that is baking. So it actually all started through my sons, because like many young children, they went through a phase of coming home and it seemed to me eating a whole week's worth of shopping in 5 minutes as they were growing up. So I started, I was in the habit of baking a fresh loaf of bread every day that would come out of the oven at 3:00 and do the job of filling them up for me. And I really enjoyed it, and my wife sent me on lots of courses where I improved my skills. And I started using that in baking. Started using the baking in ministry in church. So a whole range of things. One occasion I baked about 80 loaves one Friday afternoon. Thankfully, I was able to borrow an oven at a local cafe and do that. And I took them to a town fair and just gave the loaves of bread away at a stall at the town fair, and got into loads of conversations about Jesus, the bread of life, and that connection. I also started doing bread courses, bread workshops, teaching people how to make bread. And I found that during these courses, people were asking me, are you a professional baker? And saying, no, I'm a Baptist minister, actually. And we just get into telling my story and talking about faith and about what it means to follow Jesus. And as a result of that, I wrote a course called the Bread of Life course, which teaches bread making. And also, during the times when the loaves are proving and rising and whatever, we sit down, have a cup of coffee and talk about baking, but also about spirituality, about Jesus, the bread of life. And I was enjoying doing this stuff hugely. So it got to the point where I went to speak to my regional minister, and I had a conversation with him and just said, I just feel God is calling me to use my baking more in ministry. And we had a good conversation and prayed. At the end of it, he said to me, well, this could be of God, John, but I can't think of any opportunities or ways in which you could do that at the moment. So I'll just bear it in mind, and we'll pray about it. So off I went, thinking, well, that's the last I'll ever hear about it. I've done my bit, and I've left it with God. But unbeknown to me, a story was developing across the River Thames, only about 10 miles away as the crow flies, but it's a long journey through the Dartford, crossing over the Dartford Bridge or through the tunnel in Kent. And what had been happening there was a little independent church that for 70 years had been meeting in a shop in the middle of a parade of shops in the heart of the community of Strood. And sadly, this congregation had been dwindling, and it had got down to literally 3 ladies in their 80s who took what was for them a really difficult decision, that the time had come to close and to shut the church. But at that point, the building was a real concern to them. They didn't know what to do with it. They weren't part of a bigger denomination that would just take care of it for them, and to maintain it or look after it was just beyond them. So I don't know why, but they phoned the regional minister of a different area to my regional minister, and had a conversation with this guy and said, look, basically, if you come and meet with us, we'll give you the keys, we'll gift this building to you, and it will be a blessing to you, but it will be off our hands, and it'll be a blessing to us as well. So this regional minister came and had a look at the place, and saw that it was in the middle of a community that had lots of need and was very broken, and he felt that God was saying there needed to be ongoing ministry to be committed to this community. However, there was a real sense that just to set up another church wouldn't be any more effective at reaching these unchurched people than the previous one had been. So through prayer, he was given the guidance from God to open a community coffee shop and micro bakery to serve the local community. And he said to me subsequently, he was thinking, thank you, God, where on earth am I going to find an accredited Baptist minister who's a baker who can run this place? As it happened, that occurred almost to the day when I was having my meeting with my regional minister. 10 days later, these two are at some national meeting about something completely different, but over coffee during one of the breaks, the guy from Kent is just sharing, I've got this fantastic opportunity, but I don't know how I'm going to find the right person to do it. And the guy I'd been speaking to said, hang on a minute, what did you say? I think I know God's person for this role.
Wow.
And so through that, I made a transition from being a minister in a conventional church setting to what I guess we might call a pioneering minister, still ministering the gospel, but through running a coffee shop and a micro bakery day by day.
Wow, that is absolutely wonderful. John, can you introduce your next choice of music? Because we want to hear more.
Yes, the next song I've chosen is a beautiful song called Bring Heaven to Earth, Lord. And the chorus of this song talks about the fact that we are blessed to bless a world in pieces. And that's what I'm finding day by day, that I'm in a broken community, people that are suffering and in pain in so many different ways, who walk through the door. And the reason that God has put his love into my life and my heart is not for my sake, but actually so I can be a channel of his love to these others.
This is Close Encounters with me, Anne Donaldson, and my guest today is John Weston. And John, I'm on the edge of my seat. I want to hear more, please.
No problem. So, let's just try and bring you up to date. I said about being called to this project of running a community coffee shop and bakery. It's been an exciting adventure, very scary at times. there have been huge challenges. It cost £300,000 just to do the building work, to renovate the building and bring it up to scratch. Where was that money going to come from? Well, God provided it once again. Yes, it took a long time and lots of prayer, but God provided the money. There were all sorts of other challenges. I was appointed and began my work on the 1st of April 2020, so 10 days into the pandemic, which was a bit of an issue. And believe it or not, one of the biggest challenges was getting 3-phase electricity into the building. It was frustratingly close in some ways, just a couple of yards outside the front of the building under the tarmac. But it took 2.5 years for UK Power Networks to actually connect us and get that running. So lots of challenges, but God has been incredibly faithful in providing the answers to those, providing volunteers, and all that I've needed. And the amazing thing is just seeing God at work through these people who are coming into to a coffee shop, people who sadly are very unlikely to walk into our conventional churches. So there's one lady I can think of who back at the beginning of the year said that she would like to read a Bible. She'd never read it before. So we bought her a Good News Bible and gave it to her. And I was trying to encourage her to look to the stories of Jesus and perhaps the things that I thought would be easier for her to get into. But no, she was determined to start at page 1 and read through. And I was thinking, oh no, she'll get to Leviticus and Deuteronomy, some of those difficult bits, and that will be an end of it. She's continued reading, and she's now in the book of Daniel, which is well over halfway through the whole Bible. And she started asking me questions when she comes in to get her cappuccino. And out of that, we've started a little group to answer not just her questions, but others. I've seen 2 people, non-church people, come to faith already. We've got our first baptism that we're currently planning. And I think what encourages me most is that these are people who, are not walking through the doors of our churches, but are very happy to come in to a coffee shop and enjoy a cup of coffee and a cake and just talk about life and what's important to them.
That's wonderful. It's what we're hearing is so inspirational. I'm sure there's so much more you could share, but sadly our time is coming to an end. But John, before I ask you to introduce your final choice of music, I want to thank you so much. You've really blessed me. I've been inspired. I've been encouraged. And so thank you so much. Can you introduce your last choice, please?
Yes, my final song is Graham Kendrick's All I Once Held Dear. And the chorus of this song just talks about knowing you, Jesus, there is no greater thing. And for the last 46 years, as I've been following Jesus, that has been my testimony. There's been nothing greater than knowing Jesus, walking with him step by step.
Close Encounters on Cross Rhythms. True stories, real people.